Actually, for its time, this burial chamber is rather old-fashioned. But it's the size here that impresses you. If this had ever been finished, it would have been the biggest tomb ever made inside a pyramid. This hole for the burial chamber had to be in good strong stone on a ridge overlooking the Nile, close to the royal city of Memphis. Here then, you can see how a pyramid was built, because this one was never finished. The king, Djedefre, only lived for a few years between the builders of the two great pyramids, Cheops and Khephren. This is an unfinished pyramid from the era of the greatest pyramids of them all. When they'd finished making the hole for the burial chamber, the pyramid makers then mobilized the entire available population of Egypt to move blocks the size of this one up to the pyramid. But how on earth did these ancient people move these huge stones? Well, for 3,000 years, nobody asked the question, because the ancient Egyptians were happily trundling these big blocks around. Everybody knew how it was done. But then they went and the Christians came, and they thought the ancient stones had been moved by the power of God. They thought that if you got a little piece of papyrus and wrote a prayer on it, stuffed it under the stones, that you could shoot an arrow and the power of the prayer would send the stone up to the pyramid plateau behind the arrow. Medieval times, rabbis taught that Moses had done it with the slave gangs of ancient Israel. In the 19th century, British archaeologists, who after all were working in a colonial situation, saw that it was done by millions of coolies with firm governance, just like the British had provided. Today, of course, we've got a lot of ecologically ingenious situations with, bearded professors who come along with bits of wood and suggest that if you wet this and dry that out, it all zooms up in the air. In fact, the truth is a lot simpler. A few years ago, there was a congress of retired archaeologists in a village in France. And these elderly gentlemen, without too much physical effort, pushed huge blocks of stone down the high street in a test using mud and water. These blocks move like they're on ice if you get it going right. And these people were very skillful. These were the guys that had just made the Great Pyramid itself. It was a very simple technology and very complex organization, the reverse, the absolute reverse of the modern world. That's why we find it so mysterious. The pyramids of this first great age of pyramid building are not just the first large stone structures in the world, not just the largest either, but also the most accurate. Egyptian pyramids are far more than just a nation shoving around blocks of stone. They are set precisely on the points of the compass. Their corners are near perfect right angles, and the length of their four sides is virtually the same. With dimensions of 600 and 700 feet and more, the maximum error in them is a matter of a few inches. How on earth did they do it then? Well, the answer is simplicity, subtlety, and tremendous determination, year after year. As for some clues to their methods, well, you can find them if you look. That's the north-south line there. They used the movements of the stars to find the 4 points of the compass. And to keep the base stones, the whole foundations, absolutely level, they made a little channel right around the edge of the pyramid filled with water. And for all the angles, the right angles along here, the points that went right up to the very top, they stretched strings everywhere. The Egyptians loved geometry. Their buildings are filled with the most subtle and complex geometrical calculations. 2,000 years later, Philo-Byzantium, the man who wrote the oldest list of 7 wonders that we have, put this still at the top of his list. He was filled with wonder. He said, by works like this, men either rise to gods or the gods come down to earth.
To later ages, such magical geometry, such extraordinary accuracy was supernatural. Medieval Arab writers said that the pyramids had been built to measure time. Time itself, they wrote, is frightened of the pyramids. Eminent European mathematicians and astronomers searched for links between the Great Pyramid and the universal order. Such theories were often based on the internal chambers of the Great Pyramid, whose corridors and chambers were made with deadly accuracy. There were 3 burial chambers. The first was cut into the rock under the center of the pyramid in the traditional way. Later on, a second corridor was cut and a second burial chamber built at its end. But this too was never finished, and once again another corridor, the huge, unique Grand Gallery, a wonder in itself, was extended into the high heart of the pyramid, and a third burial chamber set at its ending. To many Westerners of the past 100 years or so, such fearful symmetries betrayed the hand of God, just as did the Holy Bible. If this was so, the measurements of these ancient stones held the history of the future in them, just as did the book of Revelations. Counting out the years from the Bible's story of creation, they measured out the corridors, through the ages of Adam and the patriarchs, through the prophets and the kings, the life of Jesus, and up to the doorway of the highest burial chamber, which, they claimed, marked the year 1914, the same year that, according to these Westerners of the 1920s, had seen the beginning of the greatest calamity the world had ever known. Suddenly then, the future lay in here, in King Cheop's great burial chamber.
Can you imagine them then, these modern mystics? The